Creative babble.
Your attention, please. Hand luggage restrictions apply to all airlines.
Today's episode is another collaboration with my buddy, my partner, my badass extraordinaire, Chris Niddle with the Burner Phone Podcast.
Please make contact with the relevant airline before proceeding through security.
It's 1972, and you're slowly filing into an American Airlines Boeing 727 with 90 other passengers right behind you. A young man going by the name of Robert Wilson enters the plane.
I was in the middle of the seat, about 7 or 8 aisles up from the back of the plane.
He may sound like an old man now, but back in 1972, he was a fresh-faced 28-year-old dressed in a sports coat and yellow trousers. Oh, and his name wasn't really Robert Wilson. It was Martin McNally. He wasn't a businessman either. McNally was here to hijack this plane. I'm Javier Leiva, and this is Pretend Radio. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else.
Attention passengers, we'll be arriving in Tulsa, Oklahoma in about...
The pilot announces that they'll be landing in 15 minutes at their final destination, but no one is going to Tulsa today. McNally is going to take control of this plane and jump out of it with $500,000. But there's still time to call it off, right? Who am I kidding? It's too late for that.
So I sat there and I was thinking to myself, well, kid, this is it. You're either going to do the job now or you can forget about it forever. Pump up your nuts and get it done, or you're going to have problems when we land in Tulsa, because you're going to have to get off the plane and you're going to have this weaponry in your attaché case, and they may have metal detectors there in Tulsa. So after thinking that over very quickly, I asked the fellow that was sitting next to me, I said, where's the restroom in this plane? He said, it's in the back on the right-hand side. Men part in the back on the right-hand side. I said, okay. So I leaned down and picked up, very, very gingerly picked up my attaché case. That thing weighed about at least 20 pounds, maybe more.
McNally makes his way to the bathroom. Once inside, he pulls out a shaggy brown wig, sunglasses, and a submachine gun, also known as a grease gun.
And then I pull out the gun, and I very, very, very cautiously engaged the chambered one of the bullets. It was ready to go. All I need to do now was pull the trigger, and that thing's going to go off. And then I put on the rubber gloves. And then I opened the door. I got my sunglasses on. I opened the door, closed the door. Now I'm in the back of the plane all the way, and none of the passengers can see me or are looking at me. So for about at least 2 or 3 minutes, I'm trying to wave one of the stewardesses back to me. And she wasn't looking at me. But when she came back, and she did look at me and did see me, the first thing she said was, don't hurt anybody. And I told her, I says, young lady, I'm not here to hurt anybody. I got a note for the pilot. Take this up to the pilot immediately and come back to me right away.
She takes the note to the pilot and quickly returns. McNally tells her to clear some of the seats towards the front of the plane.
So there was a family, a dude, his wife, and 2 kids. He told them, you need to move up to the first class section. I think the woman got up first, the wife, And then I think the daughter went, and then a young son, he was about 10 or 11, 12 years old. When the husband got up, that was another story altogether. When he got up, he was about, I would say, 6 or 7 feet in front of me. He turned around and he was looking at me. He wasn't blinking. I wasn't blinking. And that went on for about 30 seconds. So I know what he's thinking in his brain. I need to take this guy out. And he's thinking that if he can get me off guard with a blink in my eyes or something, he could quickly charge me. I know what he's thinking. So I took the gun and I pointed it directly at him and gave him my dog growl, like, and he turned around and bucked it up to the first class section at that point in time. If he had tried something, this thing would have kicked off some slugs into his body, and it would have probably killed him because I would have done my best to kill him.
He sits down. Then the pilot comes on the intercom.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot speaking. A passenger needs to return to St. Louis, so we'll need to turn the plane around.
So that was the first notice that the passengers had that we were returning to St. Louis. I had a good upbringing. My father was prosperous in the shoe business, and he provided everything for the children. Of all the kids, I was the only one that was the black sheep.
McNally dropped out of high school and enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he worked on aircrafts as an electrician. After being discharged from the Navy, he moved back to Detroit and needed money.
I was riding around with a friend of mine, and I said, I'd like to get some extra money, and I think I can get it just walking in the store and telling them it's a robbery, and get the money out of the cash registers and go on my way.
So, without giving it a second thought, McNally walks into the store and asks to buy a pack of cigarettes. While the clerk turns around, McNally whips out a gun and says,
"Don't panic, this is a hold-up. All the money out of the register. I don't want your wallet or anything else, just the dollar bills." I don't know why I was doing the stupid stunts, but there were 3 of them, and I got $50, $75, and one time on a Monday evening, $110. That was really stupid.
It's kind of ironic that he robs a gas station because years later, McNally would eventually become an owner of a Shell station. One day, while in the car with his pal Jim Petty, he turned up the radio.
So as we were going, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a news spot on one of the Detroit radio stations.
Some guy hijacked a 727 plane and jumped out with $200,000 in cash. He was never seen again.
And what they said was, all these skyjackings that are happening, they can solve the problem if they just give everybody or gets a ticket. They can give them $500,000, and these guys won't be taking these planes.
The hijacker he heard about on the radio was none other than the infamous D.B. Cooper. To this day, no one really knows who D.B. Cooper was or if he survived his escape.
And when I heard that, I said, "Oh my God!" And I laughed like hell. And I told Jim Petty, I says, "Jim, that wouldn't be a bad way to make some quick money. Just get a ticket, get on a plane, and get some parachutes and bail out."
I mean, what could go wrong, right?
And I said, "Yeah, that'd be something." So we were laughing and everything.
He was serious about this. But great secrets are apparently hard to keep. His pal Jim told a guy named Paul about McNally's hijacking plans.
James Petty said he had a conversation with Paul Zach about what I was thinking about doing. And when he said that, I responded yelling at him. I said, what in the hell are you doing talking to him about this possibility? Because that guy's got the biggest mouth in Detroit, and he's friends with one of the Detroit undercover cops. Well, he says, he won't say anything. Don't worry about it. I said, yeah, all right. I sure hope he doesn't.
If this plan was going to work, McNally needed to do his research.
I made several trips to around the country. I went to Chicago, Indianapolis, St. Louis. I went to Kansas City. I went to all these different airports, trying to determine which one would be good to take a plane from, which one had the less security, and I came up with St. Louis.
You have to remember, back in 1972, you didn't need to go through security for domestic flights. Imagine that. There's just one tiny little problem with this plan. McNally doesn't know how to skydive.
I never jumped out of a plane before. As a matter of fact, when I made the decision that, I would be doing a jump, I went over to the local library in my town, and I stayed in the library for about 5 or 6 hours, and I was getting all these books on parachuting. And what I was looking for was the calculation to determine when terminal velocity is reached. And I know that I got to get to a point of to open this parachute. When should I open the parachute? That was the key. And I came to the conclusion that from 10,000 feet at 300 miles an hour out of the plane, I would have to delay the opening of the chute approximately 15 to 20 seconds to reach a speed that wouldn't blow out the panels. And as soon as I came to that, it's an algebraic equation. As soon as I came to that, I took all the books and put them back in their place, and I said, that's it. Now I know how to delay the chute and get it open properly.
Next step, he needed a partner. He asked several people, and they said no.
And the guy that did agree was Walter Pelikowski of River Rouge, Michigan. First of all, I needed a gun. I'm going to do a score. And he said, I got a gun. So I said, I'd like to see it. And he had a very nice-looking rifle. And I said, I think this will work. So he gave me the gun, didn't even charge me. And I told Wall, I says, I'm going to do an aircraft skyjacking. And I would like you to go along, and if you do, we'll get 2 packages of $500,000 each, and we can both bail out and watch our back when we hit the ground. So after less than a month, he says, no, I can't do that. That's too scary. That's too dangerous. I said, all right, well, what I'll do is I'll give you $25,000 if you'll be my chauffeur. So I said, okay, I'll do that.
Airport, check. Skydiving 101, check. Gun, check. Partner, sort of. Finally, McNally needed to buy a ticket, so he bought one for $70 under the name of Robert Wilson. He's all set. Today's the big day.
So I took a bath and got dressed up, got my tie and my shirt, and I was looking like a businessman. I went up to the ticket counter at the loading area, gave them my pass, and gave them my ticket. So they started loading all the passengers up. There were no metal detectors or anything, so I was good to go with what I had in my head, a shake case.
So we're back on the plane. At this point, the passengers are starting to realize that the plane has been hijacked, and the cash McNally is hoping for is not on board. So they need to land in St. Louis and negotiate a new plan.
Oh, while we're on the ground, I told the stewardesses, I said, we got to get rid of some of these people. We got too many people on this plane. So let's get rid of all the people, all the women and children right now. All the women and children's got to get off the plane. And you can tell the pilot that he can announce that if anybody's got health problems, heart problems, or taking medications and so forth, they can get off too. So what came over the intercom there going to all the passengers was that the pilot said, anybody who's got heart problems, they can go too. Get up and go too. Well, let me tell you something, Chris. Everybody, 100% of the people, 100% of the people on the plane stood up and were ready to book out of the plane. I jumped out of my seat. I must have jumped 4 feet in the air. And I was screaming, sit down now. So everybody sat down. Stewardess came back to me and I said, listen, you go up there and you tell that pilot if he pulls another stunt like that, I'm going to come up and I'm going to throttle his ass. You know? No more fun and games. Don't be pulling any more stunts. So I says, we still got to get some people off this plane, all the women and children. And I want to keep about 15 healthy, able men on this plane. So you go ahead and make your choices here, but I want 15 men left on this plane. Is that clear? She said, okay, yeah, all right. So that's what she did. We unloaded the plane with all these people. We had about 15 of them. And she said, what's next? And I said, well, we got to get up in the air. We got to get off this ground. They're going to have FBI snipers all over this place. So the pilot took off, got back up in the air. And the pilot said, is it okay if I fly around St. Louis or get out of the airways of St. Louis? And I said, I never talked to him. And this was all done through the stewardess. I said, you can tell the pilot he can fly anywhere he wants to. I don't care. But, yeah, we're going to stay in the air until we got all the money ready to go on the ground. Okay, so she went up and told the pilot that. She came back and told me that they don't have the money in St. Louis. They can't get the money in St. Louis. But we got the money in our main facilities down in Dallas-Fort Worth. So is it okay if we go there? And I says, young lady, you can go anywhere you want in the world, but we need to get the $500,000.
Remember, this is the early 70s. $500,000 was really worth more like $3 million today.
So as we're going, the pilot went full speed. As we're going like that for about 5 or 10 minutes, the stewardess comes back again and tells me, yeah, we're able to get the $500,000 in St. Louis. I said, oh, yeah? What happened to the $100,000? That was all they could get. I said, now they got a $500,000? Well, let's go back to St. Louis and get it.
They had a crew change and brought the money and the parachutes on board.
As we're on the ground, the pilot came back and he sent word that they would like to change crews because these guys have been up all day. And I said, yeah, okay, you can change crews. Go ahead and do that. The money was brought on board. He brought in a sack of the money, a mail bag, and I opened it up and I looked in the bag, and in the long package it had all the $20 bills. I think there were 9,500 $20 bills. In the small package, I think there were $100 bills. And $100,000 bills were all new and serialized. So, yeah, that would have been hard to spend those bills. They brought the parachutes on. We got rid of the first crew and brought in a second crew. And on the second crew, they had put an FBI agent as the flight engineer. Now, as we're on the ground making all these changes with the money in the parachutes, I suspected, and I was right, that they had brought in a weapon through the window of the cockpit. the pilot had brought in a pistol. And that pistol was meant to kill me if they got a chance.
It's now about midnight, and they're ready to take off again. This time, with the money.
The pilot starts rolling, starts to give it the gas, throttling up, and then he stops. And he says, there's a truck on the runway, there's a vehicle on the runway. We're going to have to wait. And he says, oh my God, it's going to hit us. So, yeah, this, as it turned out, it was a brand spanking new Cadillac run by some guy named Hanley out of St. Louis.
You heard right. As they were trying to take off, a car comes out of nowhere and crashes into the plane. Apparently, this David Hanley guy was watching the hijack on the evening news while downing a couple brewskis at the airport lounge. With the help of some liquid courage, he got into his Cadillac convertible and drove through the airport fence and smashed into the wheel of the plane at 80 miles per hour.
And he was drunk as a skunk, drinking and getting drunk and everything. So he stood up and announced to the people that you keep watching this TV, you're going to see something that's going to shake the world. When the Cadillac hit the nose gear, it pushed me and my seat up about a couple of inches. And when it hit the main strut, I moved up again. So I had 2 bumps on this. But when that happened, I jumped out of my seat and I says, get this fucking plane in the air. I don't need any bullshit. Get it in the air. I was telling the stewardess that. So the pilot came on the intercom and he says, we've been hit by a vehicle. We've been hit by a vehicle. We can't take off. We're going to have to do something else. So I sent word up to him. I says, you tell ground control that we need an aircraft, a 727, any aircraft on this tarmac, and we're going to take it. Whichever airline owns it, we're taking it. I want the tanks topped off and ready to go, and that's it. So the pilot came on and told them and so forth. So when they got the plane ready, this was taking some time. When they got the plane ready, the pilot says, where do you want this thing to park? And I said, put it about 200 or 300 feet in front of us. So that's what they did. And I said, we're going to have to make the change. And one of you guys is going to have to carry the package of money. But you make sure the FBI knows that when I enter this plane, if I see anybody in this plane crouched in the seats or in the restroom, John's, I'm going to blow them away on sight, no questions. They're dead. So you make sure the FBI know this. And they did, and we did the transfer. The flight crew went first. I had one volunteer hostage. At this time, I only had one. Let everybody else go. And I had one stewardess. I think I had just one stewardess.
It took 90 minutes, but they finally got another plane.
So as I'm getting off the plane, I'm the last one to go. These 2 stewardesses are around me, and I've got my attaché case up covering my face. But they lifted the stairs up, and within a matter of a couple of minutes, we were in the air. As we get in the air, I told the pilot that fly at 10,000 feet and head for we're going to Toronto. When you hit Toronto Airport, make a pass on the runway about 300 or 400 feet, so I can verify that we are in at the airport, Toronto, and then we'll rise up to 5,000 feet and go on to JFK in New York. And I'll come up to the cockpit and give you some radio frequencies, and I will be talking to my partner on the ground. So that's the way it's going to work. I looked at my watch. I think it was close to 2:30. I forget. But I'm looking at my watch and I said, "Gee, I got to get out of this plane. It's the summer. It gets light early, and these farmers in the area that we're going in, they get up early, and I got to go."
It was now or never.
And as this was going down, there were 4 girls around me in the back of the plane. And I got the harness. I'm getting it strapped in and everything. One of the girls gets on her knees. Her name was Diane Demois, a very nice young blonde. The kind of girl I would like to marry, actually. But she's on her knees, helping me with the leg straps, and she looks up to the other 3 girls and she says, "I don't think we're supposed to be doing this." And I looked down at her and I said, "Young lady, trust me, you're supposed to be doing anything that I say. This is serious stuff, okay?"
They lowered the rear stairwell.
Earlier I had the co-pilot lower the stairs on this 727 aircraft. And what he told me was he'd never done this before, so when he does it, he's going to have to jump forward so he isn't pulled out, sucked out. So the co-pilot gets on the intercom, and he's talking to the pilot, and he's telling the pilot, "Slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up." "Okay, stop right there." So we're at the speed. And at that point there, we're doing about 300 miles per hour ground speed, 300. And that's the way I like the steps. And the FBI agent was sitting there. I'm sure he had the gun in his hand. I'm not positive, but I think he did have the gun in his hand. Now I got my gun. It looks like a grease gun, military grease gun, machine gun. And I got that thing there, and got my finger on it. And I think that was the only thing that deterred him from taking his pistol and shooting a couple of slugs into me to kill me. Now, as I'm getting down the steps, very, very cautiously, I mean, seriously, this was rough. The wind turbulence was heavy. I climbed down the stairs on my ass and my feet. I got to the end, and I'm hanging on. I don't have any gun in my hand at this time. I'm hanging on with both my hands, and I get to the bottom of the step, and I look down. The sky is clear. It's dark and it's clear, and I can see lights on the ground. Now we're at 10,000 feet.
The cabin begins to lose pressure.
I put both my feet out, and I touched the wind going over my feet. It's strong. I put both my feet out, and I very slowly eased my body out onto the airstream. Now I've got both of my hands on the bottom of the step, and I'm looking towards the earth. Okay. There's nothing else on my body connected to the plane except my 2 hands. And this is 300 miles an hour. So I look up, and in my brain I'm thinking, boy, if they knew I was this vulnerable, hanging on this plane like this, and they would just come in here and blow me away and hit me in the head, and boom, I'd be dead.
It worked. McNally holds on to the bag full of money and lets go.
I released my hands, and I immediately separated from the plane. At one point, I was thinking, "Boy, this is nuts. This is really something here."
Next time on Pretend Radio. Martin McNally hijacks a plane, grabs a bag with $500,000, and drops like a bullet to the earth.
I'm coming down, starting on at 300 miles an hour. I got to get to terminal velocity, which is about 130 miles an hour, before I can pull that chute. When I landed on the ground, and I was listening and watching to see if any farms turn on their lights.
Days later, his getaway car arrives.
As soon as I saw that sign, I said, "Walt, I know where we're at." And we're right into home stretch.
But that's just half the story.
I screamed out loud. I says, "Now, move!" So we started running fast as our little legs could carry us.
That's next time on Pretend Radio. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Chris Niddle with the Burner Phone Podcast, and he's the one that worked on this story. You might remember Chris from a couple episodes ago. We did the Good Cop, Bad Cop. It's a story about a former corrupt cop in the LAPD. It was an amazing story. And just like that story, this story that Chris brought to us today is equally as fascinating. So, Chris, tell me about this story, man. Like, tell me about why hijacking was such a big deal back in the day.
You know, during this era, it was known as the golden age of skyjacking in the United States, which ran from 1968 through 1979 and into the 80s in other parts of the world. And it was a different time then. Airport security was very lax.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I grew up in a time like in the 80s that I remember watching the news and random people would hijack planes and go to Cuba. And it was different prior to 9/11, right? Like, it didn't seem like as dangerous, like the whole plane was going to, like, you know, people were going to die. It seemed more like people wanted ransoms or people wanted some political thing. But now in like the post 9/11 era, for us who have lived during this time, it's hard for us to imagine like the airports back then, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously everyone knows the most infamous skyjacker, D.B. Cooper, who was never caught. But during this 5-year period, over 130 American planes were hijacked during the golden age of skyjacking. And Martin J. McNally was one of those guys.
Yeah, I read an article during the research here that there was like at least, you know, one hijacking a day at some point. I mean, it was like really common, right? And I think it's funny because, you know, D.B. Cooper is obviously the one that everybody knows about. But, you know, Martin McNally, you know, I almost think that's an even more fascinating story, don't you? Because we actually know what happened.
Yeah, and how often do you get to talk to a guy who hijacked a plane, demanded money from the FBI, they handed it over, and he jumped out with the money? I mean, it doesn't happen often, and it's sort of like if we could talk to D.B. Cooper, what would his experience be like? And I feel like he can kind of channel that. You know, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, man, he was a fascinating guy, you know, like this old timey like character. And I could just listen to him all day. And he had an incredible memory. I mean, this guy would like recall a specific day, the day of the week, the time of the day. I mean, and every time I looked into it, it was 100% accurate. I mean, he was dead on. What were some of the things that, like, you heard from his story and you're like, this is bullshit. This is not real.
While he was hijacking the plane, while he was still on the ground, the news was covering it live. And there was a guy in a bar nearby. And he was sitting there at the bar drinking beers, watching the TV, watching what was happening live. And he said, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. And he jumps in his ride and he takes off. He breaks into onto the runway and smashes his car into the plane as the plane was trying to take off. I mean, that alone was nuts, you know?
So I called bullshit on that too. And when my wife listened to this episode, she was like, yeah, that that couldn't have possibly happened, but it did happen. And I actually pulled up a New York Times article from like that time, and it totally happened. And it goes into it in great detail. I'll put that in the show notes too, so you guys could read more about that. It took a lot of strategy on his part too, right? Because there was like a lot of unknown factors.
Yes, and that was the first time he'd ever jumped out of a plane. So he needed to figure out how to use a parachute for the first time, right there on the spot, under all that stress. The dude had some balls. He had some serious balls.
And, I mean, I would imagine that all that cash, even if he would have gotten away with it, all that cash would have been marked, right? He would have had to launder all that money or spend it really slow. So, Chris, one of the things that, we left the audience hanging here, and I feel really bad. I mean, this is like a hell of a cliffhanger, right? Like, yeah. Martin McNally just jumped out of this plane, and there's a part 2. So there's more to talk about. But there's something that we didn't get into, which was, they weren't just going to let this guy jump out of the plane, right? I mean, obviously the airline and the FBI and everybody involved had a plan, right? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, they did. They had some countermeasures. One of those involved, and Martin didn't know this at the time, but there was an FBI plane trailing the jet. And the FBI had delivered a message to the pilot of the jet and told him, leave the exterior lights on the jet. That way, when Martin jumps out, we'll be able to see him jump out of the plane. And then we'll be able to circle the area, zero in, pinpoint his location, and swarm his ass. What ended up happening is the pilot didn't leave the lights on for whatever reason. So he fucked up. And Martin was able to get out undetected, jump into the night sky, and disappear. But yeah, they did that, and obviously they planted a FBI agent on the plane, and they were trying to take him out, but they didn't get the opportunity.
Well, we should talk about this because I think Martin McNally speaks so matter of fact that you kind of lose some of the details that are like holy shit moments, And one of them for me was the fact that he brought one of those greaser guns, like one of those greaser guns on the planes, like the ones that like the mobsters use. And like, that's to me pretty crazy. Tell me about this weapon.
I asked him about the weapon, and what he told me, he said it was a military type grease gun. He couldn't remember the make or model of the weapon. He said it had it used 45 caliber rounds, and it had a stick magazine. I think it was some sort of submachine gun. Who knows though? I'd be curious to know what type of gun it is, and maybe with further research I could find out. But he doesn't even remember the make. To be honest, he didn't sound like he really even knew how to use it. He'd never test fired the weapon before. So, he was going, flying by the seat of his pants.
Yeah. And, neither of us are like pilots or engineers or anything like that. But to me, like the idea of opening up a 747 in the middle of the air and like the cabin pressure and all that stuff. I mean, that's pretty ballsy, man.
Yeah. And the pilot had actually told Martin, he said, look, I've never opened the hatch before flying through the air. I've never let down the ramp. And he was afraid of being sucked out into the night sky. So they had to slow the plane down, speed it up, slow it down. Then they opened the hatch. But they really didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. I would imagine that would have been terrifying. And also, just so you know, that you can't do that anymore. Now, those hatches don't open up while the plane's in the air. So we've learned a couple lessons since the golden age of hijackings.
Right.
Yeah. And airport security is a little tighter than it used to. So, well, Chris, thank you so much, man, for letting us hear this story. It was incredible. And just so you know, I'm not going to wait 2 weeks to play part 2.
Oh, good.
It's going to be available next week because, I mean, that's a hell of a cliffhanger, man. You left us hanging. So
right.
What can we expect in part 2 without giving it away?
I'm not going to say anything. Just wait for part 2. I can't wait to hear it.
Thanks to our new Patreon supporter, Key Sardi. I'm just blown away by your generosity. Your donations are being put to good use, too. I used to transcribe all the interviews myself, word for word, and it would take hours, days, really. And now with your help, I'm able to send off those interviews to get transcribed. That saves me so much time that I could put back into making more shows. So thank you, Key Sardi, and everyone else who has liked the show enough to support. If you'd like to support the show, go to pretendradio.org and click on the donate button. $1 goes a long way. Again, thank you to Chris Niddle for this amazing story. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how you do an NPR driveway moment. You can now leave your car and go to work and tell your boss, I'm sorry you're late.
I'm Megan.
I'm RJ.
And we host Oh No Lit Class, a comedy literature podcast that tells you all the strange and sexy facts you never knew about the books you had to read in school.
Every episode is a fun, foul-mouthed spark notes for your ears, filled with author bios, plot summaries, bad impressions, and Megan singing.
It's mostly you that sings.
No, I sing well, she sings poorly.
That's not true. So come listen to us ruin classic literature one book at a time at ohnolitclass.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh No Lit Class. We're for kids.
No, we're not.
I'm Roseanne, host of the California Dreaming Podcast, a show that delves into the darker side of the not-so-golden state. Together, we will visit some of the most unhinged and chilling crimes that ever shook California. Join me as I take you on a journey into a new story each week with a different backdrop from all around California. From the bright lights and glamour of Hollywood to the picturesque and tranquil wine country, no crime, no town, nobody is off limits. Listen to California Dreaming on the Orbital Jigsaw Network or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you.
Creative Babble.